All right, today we're going to try something a little different. I'm in my office today, and I had a lot of people asking me this actually, so I wanted to make a video. I figured I might as well do it in my office because there's no real context to being outside, but I wanted to make a video about 5 different ways that you can raise capital for your farm without the government. So a lot of this talk about not having the government involved in the comments stemmed from the video I did about why I oppose agricultural subsidies. So that's a whole subject altogether, but a lot of people were asking about things to do without government assistance, and I figured, hey, you know what, I might as well make a video on this. This is actually something I talk about in my workshops, which I've got coming up, so check out my website, theurbanfarmer.co, go to events, and I've got a bunch of different events coming up. Maybe there's some in your areas. This is the kind of thing that I talk about in my workshops, but these 5 are pretty unique in some ways to farmers. Some of them are kind of conventional. So we'll start from the beginning. So the first one is credit unions. And the reason I say credit unions and not conventional banks is because credit unions are generally more likely to fund community-minded, small business type operations. If you go to a conventional bank and you say, hey, I'm looking to start an urban farming in people's backyards, they're going to say, you're crazy. That doesn't make any sense. But if you go to a credit union, they might be more willing to talk to you and listen to your idea. Particularly small farming, so small acreage type farming, they're more warmed up to that idea, whereas big banks are probably more interested in conventional agriculture and large, more scalable agriculture. But the credit unions are probably more open to looking at the small farm or the alternative business type model, and I've had more luck with credit unions in my experience when I'm looking for working with other farms, looking for funding and avenues like that. Credit unions have been more open to lending to small farms. So I would definitely go to a credit union before I went to a conventional bank. So the next one is crowdfunding, and this is, some of you guys are familiar with Kickstarter or other platforms like this. There seems to be a lot of them out there today, and I've seen a number of farms of people that are in my online course have done this. They've started a crowdfunding campaign. If you're somewhat media savvy, you can put together a nice looking campaign, and you can maybe make a slick video and just make something compelling to your story. Running a crowdfunding campaign is an easy way to get some money. Well, nothing's easy, but it's easier than asking for money from the government, that's for sure. You're asking people that are in your community or your friends. So one thing I've seen with crowdfunding a way to be successful at it right off the bat is to start with a small number. If you shoot for a really high number in a crowdfunding campaign, like you want to raise $80,000, you're going to be less likely to achieve that number than if you start with something small. And so the reason for starting for something small is to show that you've had the success to get that money, and then you followed up and did the thing you're going to do. So instead of making a campaign to say, hey, I want to get $80,000 to start this farm, we're going to have all this infrastructure and so on and so forth, maybe start with a $5,000 campaign to say, I want to get money for seeds and some basic tools to get the farm going, and then take that once you achieve that number, because 5,000 isn't that much, right? Get that number, get those tools, and then make some progress on your farm so that you can show the people that donated to your campaign that you've done something and you've achieved that number, because it's easier to get there than to go all the way. So you're better off having a smaller success and then doing something with that success, and then maybe coming back later and saying, okay, now we're looking to do $20,000 for XYZ on our farm. So that's what I've seen that's been more successful in the past. So the third one is private investment, and there's really nothing that complicated here, but basically just getting money from family and friends or people that you know in the business community. So, your peer groups, or, maybe you want to borrow $1,000 from your parents, $1,000 from a friend, just kind of people around you that might be willing to put up a little bit of money at a low interest rate or sometimes no interest rate, sort of as a personal loan. that's sort of a path of least resistance, and that might be my first option. If you have friends that might be willing to throw a couple $1,000s at you, maybe one or two friends or something like that, that might be an easier way to go. So nothing really complicated there. Friends and family, people around you, or sort of your immediate business community. So the fourth one, this is my favorite one, is called community bonds. And so this is sort of a new thing. There might be more history to it, though I'm not totally sure. But the whole idea with a community bond is that you're essentially creating a bond. So a bond meaning that there's a monetary figure attached to that bond, and this bond could literally just be a piece of paper, contract that you write up, and you say, if you give me $5,000, I promise to give you this much in return. And so you can make that return however you want it to be. It can be at a monetary interest rate, or it could be something like you get a certain amount of produce as an interest on this, and then after a certain period you give them the money back. So I met a farmer in rural Alberta who needed $25,000 to get his first head of cattle, and he divvied out five $5,000 community bonds that he sold to some kind of local people that were relatively well-to-do, that were interested in supporting a young farmer and also investing in local agriculture in their area. And so what he did was he put a 5-year term on the bond. And so you give me $5,000, and then for 5 years, I'll give you $200 worth of product that was going to be from his farm. And then at the end of the 5 years, he gives them the $5,000 back. So essentially, they're just parking $5,000 on his farm to help him get started, and then the appreciation he's paying is in the return of some amount of product from the farm, and then at the end of the 5 years, you get the $5,000 back. So if you know some people that have just money sitting in a bank, in an era of very low interest rates, they might look at that as an incentive to say, hey, you know what, this money can do something good for a new farmer, build some sort of social equity and some resource equity in the local area, and get a return at the end of it, getting your money back, and the interest was the product that you received. So, similar to a CSA. And so the fifth one is a CSA. And so this isn't like a community bond, because a CSA doesn't cost as much. So for those of you who aren't familiar with CSA, it means community supported agriculture, or there's various different meanings for CSA, but the whole idea is that people pay up front for a season's worth of vegetables, and then you pay them throughout the season in weekly vegetables. This is the backbone of many market gardens and small farms of today. So you can run a CSA platform to fund your farm. The thing you need to be careful with here is you have to know how to farm. I wouldn't suggest starting a CSA in your first year of farming, because there are a lot of unknowns when it's your first year, and a CSA really needs you to have a balance of product to sell. You want to have 10 or so different types of vegetables in a box each week throughout the season, and if it's your first year, that might be a risky thing to do. But if it's your second or third year, or maybe you worked on a farm for a number of years and now you're starting your own farm, then running a CSA is something that you might feel more confident at doing. So you might say, okay, if we can get 20 CSA shares at $5,000, that can get us $10,000, which is enough to get a lot of the basic infrastructure that we need. Like, I started my farm on $7,000, it was 7 years ago. So, I wouldn't have had the confidence back then to start a CSA, but even in my second year of farming, I was confident to do a CSA. And in fact, I did start a CSA in my second year. But, if I would have gone and worked on a farm, volunteered on a farm for a little while and got a little bit more of the hang of it, I would have been confident to start a CSA right off the bat. But you need to have that experience in order to be able to do that, so that you can follow up with your promise. Because when people give you money, they're going to expect something in return. So that's where you need to be careful. And this is the whole the thing you have to be careful with in general if you're going to be asking for money and borrowing money from people. That's why I generally tell people, if you don't need to borrow money, you're better off just keeping your day job for another year, saving up some money and starting it yourself, so you don't have that risk of owing people, because there is a lot of stress risk that can come from that. If you've got $50,000 of money that was granted to you by a bunch of different individuals, that can really weigh on a person. And, if people are looking for a return on their money, they're going to ask you questions. And, it's like people in venture capital. You get these guys that they want to turn and burn. They want a 10% return each year. They give you a bunch of money. They're calling you on the phone to say, hey, what's going on? They're always checking in. That can be a stressful thing. So anyways, those are my 5: credit unions, crowdfunding, private investment, community bonds, and CSA. So I hope you guys have found that helpful. If you want to see more stuff like this, please hit the subscribe button right now. Like and share these videos with your friends, and check out my website, theurbanfarmer.co, where you've got links to all the workshops and events that I'll be doing this winter, and my book, my one-day course, my online course, and you can make a donation to the show there, and it's much appreciated and always welcome. All right, talk to you soon.